Hello and welcome. This is IH Securities, a financial services company that facilitates trades on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. I'm Vanessa and this is Tatenda. Thank you for all the feedback we received on the last videos. We appreciate it and please do keep the feedback coming. On this episode, we're going to be chatting around the Zim consumer sector. So with all this talk of improving Zim macros, what does that mean for the average person on the road, that is the Zimbabwean consumer?
Okay, thank you for that, Vanessa. So allow me to break it down. So if we're looking at the formally employed consumer, we can take, for example, the civil servant. In fact, let's use them as a proxy. When you're looking at your 2018, your 2019, there was a real devaluation in salaries, and really that's when your inflation was picking up. We first hit three digits in 2019, but coming into 2020, then most employers then revalued those salaries. Most, in fact, they introduced some sort of inflation hedging for salaries. An example would be that $75 allowance that civil servants receive, and then so that's the formally employed consumer. Then you have a look at your informally employed, and it's estimated that about 70% of them are employed in agri-linked or agro businesses. So if we're saying that that sector is going to be improving and there's going to be improved output, it therefore speaks to improved consumer earnings from those informal sector. And then if you're looking at the informal and formally employed just as a whole, we've been tracking volumes growth or your consumer facing stocks on the stock market. So an example would be your Delta, your InScores, your Simbisas, your NatFoods. And we've been seeing real volumes growth from the second half of last year coming into this year. So it's volumes growth from a low base, but it's still real volumes growth. So that's speaking to increased consumer spending, which means the consumer is earning more.
When you think of COVID's impact on the informal sector, the first people will come to mind are flea market and transport operators. It then becomes hard to talk of increasing disposable incomes.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. So it lets me give a qualifying statement to what I was saying before. So these recovery in earnings that we're speaking of in consumer earnings haven't been uniform across the board. So there was a survey done by your Zimstats in conjunction with World Bank that showed that with your urban centers, and that's where the non-agri-linked businesses that you're talking about are concentrated, they had, during the lockdown, they had constrained earnings because of the lockdown. So yes, that recovery in earnings hasn't been uniform across the board. I feel it's also important to then talk about your diaspora remittances. They hit a 6-year high last year, and we're expecting another record diaspora earnings remittances this year, and which then means those provide a buffer for your local consumer. It means that when shocks come, for example, you're increasing utility costs, those diaspora remittances then act as a bridge between your constrained income and the costs that you're having to cover.
So in essence, we're saying there is evidence of increased consumer earnings, but recovery is uneven across the sectors. And as a country, we're generally trending below the 2016 earnings level. So what should we expect for 2022 going forward?
So going into 2022, so just like with your 2021, where we had a bumper harvest for 2020-2021, we have another bumper harvest forecasted for 2021-2022, and that will act as a catalyst for that continued growth in consumer earnings. So the rate of growth might differ depending on how the environment plays out, like your policies, but we still expect that consumer earnings growth. Now, given that this is a broking firm, I guess the question then becomes, what does this information mean for the investor on the stock market? So looking at your consumer-facing stocks on the stock market, as I had mentioned before, your Deltas, your InScores, your Simbisas, your NatFoods, it means we expect continued volumes growth going into 2022 because of those improving consumer earnings. And it means that the high prices that we're seeing on the stock market will then begin to make sense as those company earnings improve.
That was very insightful, Tatenda, and should give us an idea of which stocks to look out for on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you found the session informative. Please do feel free to reach out to us with any comments and questions. Do subscribe to our social media platforms. Bye for now.